What's happened there? Right, okie doke. Lovely. So, line this up a bit better. Okay, just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. So you're all familiar with the routine. Hopefully that gives you a chance to change sides, gives you a chance to find that sort of pathway inwards, I suppose, to the sort of feelings, the qualities, the space, however you think of it, upper part of your chest, belly, and your legs. Right, let's get myself center screen. So, sitting back. And this feeling of just being able to settle back. Remember, you can always use different sort of cushions and so on and so forth to support you if you need to. So, for instance, I've got, I'll show you what I mean. These foam blocks, sometimes referred to as yoga pads, these kind of things. You can put them behind a chair, underneath your feet or whatever. But also, you probably heard me say before, you can use telephone directories I've used in the past, and so on and so forth. Just make sure that you're comfortable and get that feeling of dropping back into your chair. And focus not so much on the technical side of the posture at the moment, but just on how it feels when you do this, because that's the memory, the recollection of that can be a really useful way of feeling, sort of getting into the posture, because you have a sense of where you're going to, and that's really important. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And then when you move to the upright posture, do so with the idea that you're going to keep this feeling. It's going to change because at the moment you're angling backwards, and as you come to the upright, that will change and you'll start to feel yourself going downwards more. And of course, what we want to try and do is, come forwards, is to get to a point where we are slightly angled, so there's that little bit of pressure in the soles of your feet. And when you can feel that, and you might want to concentrate on one foot or something like that, but you want to feel that where you feel that pressure, there's a sort of bit of give, a bit of softening, like you might get if you were standing on a soft carpet or something. And then that feeling just finding its way up through into your knees and back to your hips and your lower back. So the whole feeling in your body is this slow, almost like melting away, but it gets stopped by this stronger feeling deeper in your body. I think that's a helpful thing to recognize, because we get very much into a habit of holding ourselves tight, and we kind of get used to it, and we unconsciously think that we need that. So if we can get a sense for this inner strength, and you can think of it as coming through the skeleton or a bit broader than that, doesn't really matter to begin with, as long as you feel that there is the support from within your body. That too is something to bring your attention back to. So give yourself a few moments just in the sitting position. Again, you might want to focus on your breathing a bit. You want to just feel what's happening in your body, and in particular areas that might feel a bit blocked, a bit tight, one way or another. And with those areas, what we want to try and do is, as we start to move, as we will do in a moment, that movement sort of dissolves those areas a little. And the focus of your attention will actually help with that. So turn in your head, and sometimes we find that you suddenly realise you're a bit stiff in your neck or something like that. That's not at all unusual. So there's an element of sort of checking in with yourself, I think, that goes particularly with the opening of these sessions. And of course, you will find that you start to move a little bit more smoothly as blood and the energy begin to circulate, particularly as the blood gets into the sort of periphery of the muscles and the blood vessels open up a little bit. And then hands in front of your shoulders. Another possibility that the repetition offers is a deepening awareness of what is happening within each movement. We often find that even a very simple movement like this one has depths that get revealed over a period of time. And then going forwards. So we want to maintain a listening attitude. It's not just our minds, as it were, dictating to our bodies, but our bodies informing our awareness. And then your hands out to your sides and winding around. Just trying as you do this, your arms hanging down. So there's a certain amount of weight in your hand as your fingers drop, and likewise in your wrist and your elbow, your shoulder. And again, we often have the habit of sort of straining against that, but we discover with Tai Chi that there isn't a need for that. And then winding around. I always think this process is a bit akin to being in water, and if you haven't been swimming for a while and you get in the water, it can take a few minutes to remember that the water's quite buoyant. It will actually support you. Back the other way. Because one of the things that comes out of a daily practice, if you can go through a few of these movements in the morning before you really start your day, then you refresh that awareness that you don't need the strain, you don't need the tension. And rest your hands. Ease forwards and push back. turn. So more emphasis on one side of your body, one leg. Think about the response of your leg to the weight going into it. Are you kind of, again, sort of just habitually resisting that, or are you able to let the leg relax and absorb your weight? And when it does that, you'll find that it starts to just quite naturally push you back. And then in the other direction. And then over. The spine beginning to float in your back a little bit. Change direction. See how it feels if you can just focus on that middle part of your body, your hips and your waist, leading the movement, as it were, from there. So you tilt your pelvis forwards, your weight goes forwards, your upper body tilts, and so on and so forth. And back to the middle. Raise your heel and step forwards. See if you can push the foot gently into the floor. Again, as though you were stepping onto a soft carpet or onto soft sand. Good. The other side. And then bring your feet back. Your hands drop down and fisherman cast in there. If you're trying to build your own practice, don't feel you have to stick to a particular order. I mean, it works quite nicely in this order, this set of movements. And there's a value to that. But if you find it difficult to think, oh, well, no, what's the next one? Do the exercises that you can remember. There's plenty of time to consider things like what order they come in and so on. You're not going to do yourself any harm by missing the movement out or getting it in a different place. Just remind yourself of how it felt when you were doing that basic weight transfer exercise a few moments ago. Make sure that bringing your arms into the movement hasn't disrupted that. Changing, rolling the ball into your chest. Try not to rush any part of the movement. Pigeon spreads its wings. And then pressing forwards. Now fist your hands. Again, looking to feel the rotation right through your arm into your shoulder and through there, connecting to your upper back, the ribs, and ultimately, of course, through the whole of your body. And change, winding out. Once again, as your hands drop down, just for a moment, then your arms and hands feel quite heavy. Don't strain to pull them up. Go out. As you wind your hands around, just let your elbows drop and your hands will very gently come to roughly hip height. We look for the path of least resistance in the movement. And this is a basic principle all the way through. One more time. Hands in, feel your body expanding upwards, particularly the upper body. Feet are pressing down, hips are pressing down. So your spine lengthens and contracts. And at the same time, that slight bit of pressure downwards through your hips and your feet sort of locks you into the ground a little bit, gives you the stability for the upper body to move from. That's the all-important counter movement. There's always a counter movement somewhere. And ultimately, it's really always down into the ground. I mean, depending on what you're doing, it might take different routes, but it should always be there. One more. And change to the wild goose. So this habit of always finding the counter movement is another one of those things that eventually just stays with you. It's just that becomes a subconscious action on the part of your body, like so many other things that we do. So again, the regular practice and your awareness of doing that in the practice, getting that downward movement, hardwires itself into your system. And then easing forwards. Hands come down, and then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. Both hands. Focus on the feelings in your back, the expansion and the contraction, a nice sort of broadening and or lengthening of your back each time, and then the contraction, a steady pulse or a massaging quality to the movement. And what we want to try and do is, when in a few moments we add the turn in such a way that enables you to keep that pulsing feeling in your back. That basically will mean turning from your hips, not straining, just allowing your shoulders and your arms and whole your upper body to follow that movement. So this time we'll add the turning in. You might find that you quite naturally just push down a little bit through the opposite side of your body, your hip and your knee, as you turn. So again, feet and hips are very much a part of the movement. And again, it's the hard wiring of that awareness of what's happening in your feet and your hips. It's one of the great things that stays with us as we go through our daily lives, outside of the sessions. The other thing, of course, is that paying attention in this sort of detail, it's a good practice for your mind. From the meditational point of view, just looking for smaller and smaller detail increases this quieter, calmer quality that is so much a feature of the art. One more round. One foot out, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Think about this leg, the straight leg, the bent leg rather, the one, and as you go forwards, but it's really no weight going into the extended leg. You will find some of the weight going into this leg. So this is important for supporting your whole body through this movement. Now, rolling your fingers into a hollow fist. And this time as you go forwards, using that movement to draw your arms over. I suppose it's almost like if you were going to sort of dive into water, your head goes forwards, your arms swing over, following the movement. More of an upward movement than you would expect diving into water, but not so dissimilar. Grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. And then put out on the other side. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. and grasping the tiger's ears. Good. And then bring your feet back. Okay. Hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So let's build the movement up in stages. First of all, going back to this simple transfer of your weight. And then factor in the turning again. In one direction, then the other. Each time we add another movement, the movement becomes more complex. And again, what we want to be able to do, I suppose it's a bit like, if you were laying bricks or stacking books, the first book is flat, and that's okay. Then you put the second book on, and if that's a little bit tilted or if it's a bit off, then the one above that is going to be wrong, and so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that each stage is correct. You bring your hands into the movement. Just imagine holding on to something here. A tray of drinks or a cup of tea or something like that. So you keep that feeling of your arms carrying a kind of quiet, still quality. And then finally, the arms become a little bit more active. They just lift straight up and your arm extends out, turning palm down. And your hands are level with each other in the middle, and then you switch to the other side. Try and feel as though when you turn in your hip, and that moves your shoulder. And your shoulder pushes into your arm, or in this case, pulls on your arm, and then you put it in your elbow and your wrist and your fingers in that order. One more time. Same body action, just a slight change in your arms. They open out a little bit, and cow gazes at the moon. Again, one more time. After this, let one hand rest, but your other hand does almost the same thing. Doesn't go up quite so much. So with cow gaze at the moon, the arm would have gotten to there, but here we're going to go into parting the wild horse's mane. So it's a slightly more economical movement. And also we want to feel perhaps a little bit more that our shoulder, our elbow, and the whole of that side of our body and our arm are engaged. So this is where imagining some kind of resistance, like moving through water, can help. Another image could be that you're just, if you've got something in your hands and there's a swing door in front of you, sometimes you just lean into the door with your shoulder and it swings open, and then you maybe push your hands through. So it's like the initial movement here creates a little bit of space, and then your elbow, and then you sort of feed your hands through. One more time. Same thing on the other side. There's that same sense of your arm lengthening a little. Not so much, just at the end of the extending stage of the movement, my elbow's still hanging down quite significantly. Your arm is always guided by what's happening in the center of your body. One turning one way and then the other. And to go into the full movement, just simply leave your hand at that height. So, but your center turns the same way. Now you can hold the ball, move back across, turn in that direction, and then same thing again, pushing out. This time the top hand will just go straight down until it's almost resting on your leg. You come back, hold the ball, move across, return, and again. So parting the wild horse's mane. So as the complexity of the movements increases, it's more challenging to maintain those core qualities, the equilibrium, the openness, the quietness of the mind, because it's like after a little while, I thought, oh, what's going on? So, and with all of those things, to regain them, the practice is really to learn to bring your attention back to the center of your body, your feet, the movement of your weight, as a kind of regular process. And actually, if you look at this movement, the movement will do that for you, because we have this rhythm as always. We extend out, we come back, we hold the ball, we move across, and then we settle into the hip and we turn a little bit. And that brings our attention right back to the center. And then we start the whole process again. And again, these are ways of moving, qualities, not just of movement, but just of being, I suppose, that we want to become familiar with to a point where it happens quite naturally. Let's do one more on each side. So even if you feel you can't do this exercise, there's still a value in trying. In fact, in some ways, there's more value in trying than just finding it easy. And then just rest. So underlying the actual movements, there's an approach to movement and to dealing with problems, I suppose you could say, that we're training ourselves in. I remember some years ago, I've been learning to play clarinet and saxophone for years. I say learning to play, I'm not really very good, but I do go for lessons. And some years ago, I was doing a piece on the clarinet that I thought was particularly challenging. I don't know if it was or not, but it was for me. And I was standing there and I did it, and my teacher said, "Yeah, that was good. That was great." He said, "Just one question." He said, "Why were you standing like that?" And I said, "Well, how was I standing?" And apparently I'd gone into this sort of position. I had the clarinet in my hand and I'd raised my foot, put one foot in front. And it's a classic Tai Chi position, standing position, coming from the martial side of things. And I had no idea I was doing it. It wasn't deliberate, but I felt as though I was being really tested. I was under pressure. I was trying quite hard. And my response in my body and in my mind was to use a phrase from the old writings in Tai Chi, to seek the stillness within the movement. And we could substitute stillness for rooting, calmness, centeredness, whatever. So that our response when we're under any kind of pressure begins to change. And that pressure could just be, those points where we trip on a mat or on a pavement, or it could be something much bigger, but it's the same kind of thing. And this I think is something that is really important about Tai Chi, this kind of habit that gets hardwired of not simply getting stressed and getting tensed and losing our sense of stability and so on and so forth, but rather finding that we do have ways to go back. So now, rubbing your hands together, once again, tapping on your face, over your head and neck, down to one shoulder, and your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Your belly. And your legs. Good. And then if you wish to stand, stand. And as always, the chair can be a useful tool to allow you to play around with some of these ideas, as can the wall or table or whatever. I have to move this one out of the way, so I've got a bit of room, but it's not an indication that you need to do that. And just feet parallel or slightly turned out. If I come a bit closer, maybe see that some of us have feet that do turn out slightly, just a little bit like that. Sometimes you'll see me standing. I've learned over the years, I've trained over the years to turn the feet in, and it's quite comfortable for me like that most of the time. What you don't want is this. You don't want to be wildly out, because you need to keep an alignment in your body. The way that you're facing should be the way your toes are facing, and in particular the way your knees are facing. But you should never force anything. So this turning in of your foot, you shouldn't stand there thinking, oh, it'll feel comfortable in 10 years' time. Find a comfortable position for yourself to work in. And then just listen your weight sink down a little bit and pushing up and sinking down. So again, we've got that movement downwards. It's a very definite, very clear push downwards through your feet. But also as you go up, you want to feel as though there's this weight hanging from your hips. Not so much that it really causes you to strain, but just enough so that at a certain point, there's just a natural sense of going down again. And then change into the wild goose. And part in the clouds. One more time. Shake out. 1 foot forwards. Now, just to emphasize what I was talking about a few moments ago, this quietening, this settling, once you've sort of got this movement going, think of it in 4 stages, not just forwards and backwards, but there's a very slight pause as you settle into each foot, and you go forwards and you settle into the front foot. It doesn't last very long, and as you get used to it, it will shrink until eventually it's just there in the background. And there's something rather nice about this. We probably all heard me say we live in a very hectic world, very fast-moving world, and we're kind of always doing. And just that remembering to stop a little bit can be incredibly beneficial for mind and body. And it's also at that point that we're able to begin to sort of raise our toes, our heels, and to take the step. If that's difficult for you to take the step, which it is a tricky movement, isn't it? What will happen is part of you will start to respond with the, oh, got to do it quickly. That sort of like jerking the movement. And that's a very natural response. It's a kind of adrenaline response to being under that pressure, but it's not always helpful. And that's where this sense of just stopping for a moment. It's not a competition. And sometimes you can stand there and think, well, how do I move the foot? And you have to sort of think about that. But if you practice it, you'll get there. Shake out. Once again, this lovely idea of a stillness within the movement. Two qualities that we might originally sort of like imagine as being contradictory and incompatible. One image used for the center part of the body is it's like the hub of a wheel. And if you ride a bicycle, interestingly, the hub of the wheel goes around it. So the hub stays still and allows the movement around it. And so we begin to realize that the two things, movement and stillness, aren't contradictory, but rather complementary. They enable each other. And then with the step. So as much as possible, we're trying to do this in a very even way without straining. And that is very difficult. There will be times when you wobble, and that's not a failure. And again, it's one of those very simple movements that's quite difficult, but the benefits of which really mushroom out through lots of our daily actions. And shake out. And then 1 foot forwards again, and fisherman cast a net. And once again, be careful not to let the fact that you're moving your arms remove any awareness from what's happening in the rest of your body. And so again, we're training our minds to encompass more of what's going on in our body, eventually without having to think too much about it, just a general background awareness. We're aware of lots of things, noises in the house and people's voices and different sounds and sensations. So this is just something that we're building in to our normal everyday responses. One more time. And then the other side. One more time. And bring feet back to the parallel position. Lovely. Go back to your chair. So again, with the last exercise, it's very much this notion of a return to, well, however you imagine the quality, really, whatever label you care to put on it, and it's worth focusing on that. So again, and what I want you to focus on is what it means to you, not what it means to me. So what are the things that you know, if you were outside and you were getting, you know, you were in a queue in a shop and it's getting stressful, or you know, you have that little trip and you don't want to fall over, obviously, or whatever. You know, to begin with, you keep it very simple. And what's the sort of trigger for you to come back just for a moment to that quieter space, so that you're not constantly kind of on edge, not on the edge of the wheel? If you imagine a roulette wheel, if you spin a roulette wheel, the ball goes whizzing around and the ball's very frantic around the edge. But again, there's that still center. And you know, where would you rather be seeing the movement from? Bouncing around, not knowing what was going on, or with that slightly calmer quality? So feel what it is. It could be the image of the movement, it could be something physical, combination of that, whatever. Embrace tiger, return to mountain. And then come to rest. Lovely. That went very quickly for me. I hope that was useful too. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in once again. And we'll be back next week, of course. Does anybody have any questions at this point?